Hey guys! Tonight we're slipping quietly into the fog of 1665 London, a city muffled in silence where horses' hooves echo down empty alleys and windows are shuttered tight, not from the cold, but from fear. The plague has arrived, and so have you tucked in your wool coat trying not to breathe too deeply? You're here for one reason: to find something to eat. You shuffle down Cheapside, normally a chaotic artery of shouting merchants and clattering carts now eerily hushed. You smell something: not fresh bread or hot stew, but damp wood, spoiled meat, and something far worse you can't quite name. If rats had food critics, this would be their 5-star zone. Most of the stalls are shuttered. The fishmonger's slab lies bare. A shriveled turnip rolls gently in the breeze. You eye a crumbling loaf left behind and consider the moral weight of swiping it until you spot the rat already halfway through. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your country and local time. I'd love to see how far this sleepy little story travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pass a cloth-covered cart, its owner long gone, leaving behind a stack of rock-hard biscuits that could double as doorstops. Your stomach growls. A woman peers out from a second-floor window and mutters a prayer. You nod politely and move on. It's June, and the sun is trying to burn away the fog, unsuccessfully. You round a corner and see a baker's boy sweeping ash from an oven with no fire. He glances at you, shrugs, and says, "No flour." Not angrily, just the dull acceptance of someone who hasn't tasted fresh bread in weeks. Historians still argue whether this shortage was entirely due to the plague or if it just accelerated existing grain distribution issues. Either way, it's slim pickings. You push further into the belly of the city to the old meat market. Normally the domain of shouting butchers and the heavy smell of ox blood, it's now silent. A single sheep carcass hangs like a forgotten coat. Flies swarm it like it's prime real estate. A man could be a butcher, could be just hungry, slices a chunk off with a knife that looks suspiciously unclean. He doesn't make eye contact. Neither do you. Someone's roasting something nearby. You follow the scent like a cartoon character floating through the air until you see it's just chestnuts burnt, half rotten, but warm. You buy 3 for a penny and chew slowly, trying not to taste the mold. Food in this city, it turns out, is as much about timing and rumor as it is money. You hear whispers of a fishmonger in Southwark who still smokes eels, or a widow near Shoreditch who sells tarts filled with actual fruit, but who's brave or foolish enough to wander far for a snack these days. Still, people eat, somehow. A popular survival technique pretending food still exists. Tavern menus haven't changed. They just don't serve anything on them. You walk past a pub boasting fresh roast duck, kidney pie, barley stew. A sign on the door reads, "Closed until the Lord wills otherwise." One enterprising vendor is selling plague-repellent gingerbread shaped like tiny coffins. You buy one. It's inedible, but you carry it anyway, never hurts. You spot a child gnawing on a leather strap, softening it enough to chew. His mother gives you a look that says, "What are you staring at?" You move on embarrassed, chewing your own gingerbread coffin with slightly more conviction. Curiously, the rats seem fatter than usual. Bold, too. One drags a moldy apple across the cobblestones like it's won a prize. You half consider stealing it. The apple, not the rat. You round a corner into Smithfield and are met by the sound of bells, not the comforting chime of church, but the handbell of the dead cart man. "Bring out your dead," he calls mechanically. You step aside as he trundles past, nodding at you like a postman on his route. Your stomach clenches. Not from fear, well, not just from fear, but from hunger. You think of what people used to eat in this part of town: thick cuts of beef market pies, sticky ale puddings. Now you'd settle for boiled cabbage and not even complain about the worms. Historians debate whether the complete collapse of food supply chains during the 1665 plague was citywide or mostly localized to infected parishes. But walking these streets, it certainly feels citywide. It's not famine exactly, it's just absence. An eerie, uncanny silence where appetite used to be. 2. You sit on a doorstep and take a slow breath. The chestnuts weren't enough. Your body aches not from illness, at least not yet, but from the effort of being constantly alert, constantly disappointed. You miss the smell of frying onions, the weight of a proper loaf, the sharp tang of blue cheese from the vendor on Fleet Street who used to wink at you. Everything now is shadows and memories, and the occasional leathery biscuit. A bell rings again, this one not for the dead, but from the docks. A whisper of hope, perhaps a shipment of grain has arrived, maybe a barge from the countryside. You stand stretch and follow the sound. Maybe, just maybe, someone is still baking. You follow the distant clanging of the dock bell through streets that twist like a half-forgotten memory. The closer you get to the Thames, the busier things seem, at least relatively. A few boats bob lazily near the wharves, and bundles of something you pray it's food are being hoisted ashore by men with scarves over their mouths. Whether that's to protect from the stench or the sickness, you can't say. The scent here is different from inland London. Stronger, saltier, more alive, like the river's doing its best to scrub the city clean with each tide. You hear a voice call out, "Oats, oats," from Kent, and your pulse picks up. You elbow past a man asleep on a sack of dried peas and find the source, a tired farmer, his cart half empty, selling oats by the scoop. You lean in, ready to buy, and he eyes you warily. "No credit," he mutters. You nod, reach for your last coin, and trade it for a small cloth sack. He even throws in a pinch of dried thyme. "Keeps the plague from the belly," he says, winking. You suspect this is nonsense, but thank him anyway. Oats mean porridge, and porridge means hope. Historians still argue whether oat supplies truly held up during the 1665 outbreak, or if rural sellers exaggerated scarcity to raise prices. Either way, if you had a bit of coin and a tolerant stomach, porridge remained one of the few constants. You just had to ignore what the milk might have come from. You wander along the riverside, oats in hand, when something odd catches your eye. A small table draped in patterned cloth, surrounded by crates. The woman behind it is selling, of all things, foreign pickles. Indian mango, Venetian lemon, French cornichon. She says like she's listing royal titles. You're pretty sure the jars are all English turnip in various stages of dishonesty, but she's got charm, and it smells briny and alive. She offers you a taste on a wood spoon, sharp, vinegary, almost electric. You buy a spoonful, and it zings across your tongue like gossip. It'll ruin your stomach later, but for now you feel oddly civilized. Somehow, even in plague-ridden London, people still crave something sour. You take your treasure's oats, a bit of thyme and turnip masquerading as mango, and seek a place to cook. Public fires are rare now for fear of spreading infection. Chimneys smoke here and there, mostly over richer homes who can afford staff and quarantine. You pass a church where women are boiling water in great black cauldrons. For the sick, they say. You pretend not to be disappointed. Finally, in a quiet alley, near a collapsed stable, you spot a tiny stone hearth someone's built beside a wall. There's still a faint ember. You kneel, add twigs, and coax it into flame. Your oats bubble slowly in a cracked pot you found abandoned 2 blocks ago. You drop in the thyme. The result is more glue than gruel, but it's warm and vaguely edible. You eat slowly as though this is fine dining. A rat watches from the shadows, impressed. A man approaches, limping slightly, and gestures toward your pot. You nod and share what's left. He eats with the quiet desperation of someone who remembers better meals but won't talk about them. Used to be a cook at Whitehall, he mumbles between bites. Now I'm just hungry. Historians note that even palace chefs weren't immune to the upheaval. Food supplies to royal households continued sort of, but court banquets became sparse affairs. The plague, it turns out, doesn't care much for rank. As you scrape the bottom of the pot, the man pulls something from his coat. A lump of sugar hard as stone. Here, he says, cracking it with a rock and offering you half. You suck on the fragment, slowly grateful. Sweetness feels like memory, like luxury. You talk for a while about old markets, about the taste of gooseberries, about whether coffee will ever catch on in England. Historians still argue whether coffee houses helped spread news or just gossip during outbreaks. You suspect both. But you'd kill for a weak cup right now. The man disappears before long, leaving only the faint smell of burnt oats and some soot on your sleeve. You lean back against the wall, momentarily full. And that here and now is a miracle. Not far off, someone is frying something. It smells questionable, but undeniably fried. You follow the scent to a small cook shop still daring to operate. Plague pies the sign jokes, and the man behind the pan grins through yellowed teeth. He's ladling batter into hot oil, some mix of flour, old lard, and mystery bits, flattening it into rounds. You buy one. It's crunchy, salty, and unidentifiable. Possibly turnip, possibly rat. You try not to dwell. Fried foods, it turns out, are a sort of comfort food for the desperate. Easy to mask flavors, easy to chew if you still have teeth, and best of all, hot enough to feel like real cooking. There's a line here, small but steady people craving not just food, but normalcy. You notice a man with a bundle of dried herbs tucked into his hatband. Keeps the plague away, he says when you glance. You nod solemnly. Everyone's got their ritual. You chew your mystery pie and pretend it's a roast duck leg. As dusk falls, the air turns colder. The river glints with the last of the light. You wander toward a cluster of people humming softly around a brazier, passing a bottle between them. Someone offers you a swig. It's gin, probably homemade, and it burns all the way down. You smile. Your dinner, such as it is, consisted of oat glue, fake mango pickle mystery pie, and illicit gin. But you're warm, slightly full, and remarkably not alone. In this haunted city of silence that might be the best anyone can hope for. By morning, the faint illusion of comfort has vanished. The fire's gone out, and your clothes still smell faintly of fried oil and smoke. Your stomach groans, not quite in hunger, but in quiet rebellion against last night's pie. Still, you're alive, and that places you ahead of quite a few Londoners this week. The air is crisp, carrying a blend of damp brick old fish and something less pleasant. You make your way inland again, zigzagging through quieter streets where chalk X's mark infected homes. Many are boarded. Some are eerily open, as if the plague just walked out and left the door swinging. You pause near a bakery that once sold warm rye loaves and saffron buns. Its shutters are closed, its windows soot-smudged. A child-sized handprint smears the glass. You wonder who left it. You wonder if they're still breathing. But not all food businesses have vanished. Just a few blocks away, behind a butcher's stall now long abandoned, a woman, with sleeves rolled to her elbows, stirs something pungent in a blackened pot. Onion broth, she tells you without asking. Want some? You do. The broth is thin, salty, and more water than onion, but it's warm. You sip slowly, grateful for the steam on your cheeks. Better than plague water, she says, chuckling at her own joke. That phrase, plague water, has come to mean many things. Some swear by tonics infused with angelica root or vinegar-soaked herbs. Others carry pomanders or drink mixtures so bitter they could kill your appetite and your faith in herbalism in one go. Historians still debate how effective these brews were, if at all, but in a city where medicine's more guesswork than science, even superstition goes down easier than despair. The woman stirs her pot with theatrical focus, then leans in. You know what, the upper sorts are eating beef jelly, like a wobbly brick. I read it in a leaflet. She laughs again. Imagine dying of plague and your last meal was beef jelly. You chuckle, though your stomach turns at the thought. It's true, though. Recipes from wealthier households included calf's foot jelly, meant to be both nutritious and delicate. Gentry who could afford it turned to such gelatinous experiments, hoping strength could be spooned into the sick. The poor, meanwhile, clung to onion broth and hope. You wander again. A man passes with a basket of what he loudly calls plague pies, same as the night before, but colder and chewier. You wave him off, craving something simpler. At the next corner, a woman crouches beside a sack of dried beans, sorting them with care. She's laid them out like jewelry: lentils, broad beans, marrow-fat peas. Soup for sale, she calls to no one in particular. Boiled this morning. You buy a cup. It tastes like boiled history, faintly smoky, faintly herbal, and absolutely timeless. You ask what's in it. She shrugs. Whatever I had. Soup has always been a savior in lean times. It stretches ingredients. It hides rot. It makes you feel like you're eating more than you are. And in a city plagued by plague, it also gives people a reason to gather, if only briefly. You sit on a stone step sipping your soup and watching two boys hurl crab apples at each other with startling precision. Apples, one of them yells suddenly. You look over and see an older man carrying a basket of tiny red fruits. You follow. The apples are shriveled but sweet. Not the waxy beauties of courtly feasts, but windfalls picked from hedgerows or trees just outside city limits. You buy 3. The first crunch is dry, but the second tart, sharp, glorious. It reminds you of September. The man tells you he traded salt for these. Salt, which still travels upriver from coastal towns, is precious now, not just for seasoning, but preserving. Cured meat's gold these days, he says. Too bad nobody's got pigs. In truth, most livestock had either fled, with their owners been slaughtered early, or died of neglect. Chickens were easiest to keep, hence the constant faint crowing even in plague-ridden neighborhoods, but pork a delicacy. You thank the man and walk on, noticing how your tongue remembers the apple even as the sweetness fades. Past a burnt-out carriage and a shuttered apothecary, you spot something unusual. A stand with saffron cakes. Real saffron. You blink. The vendor sees your skepticism. Got it from a sailor, she whispers. Stolen probably, but it smells right. Saffron dried crocus stigmas from southern Europe or Asia wasn't just a flavoring, it was currency. Yellow cakes signaled status. Even now, amid death and ruin, someone was willing to pay for golden crumbs. You ask how much. She eyes your threadbare cloak and shrugs. A song then. So you sing softly something half-remembered from childhood. The words falter, but the rhythm stays. She listens with closed eyes, then hands you a small saffron bun. It tastes of festivals and forgotten birthdays. Lightly sweet, gently spiced, and bright yellow inside, like sunlight trapped in bread. You sit beside a closed tavern and eat slowly, crumbs falling like ash. Someone passes with a roasted chestnut cart, and you almost laugh street food London style. You have no more coin, but the smell alone is worth following. You trail the chestnut man until he stops to light his brazier. The chestnuts crackle and hiss, their skin splitting like promises. He hands you one without asking. You look like you needed that, he says. Chestnuts are a gift, soft, smoky, warm in the hand. You eat with closed eyes. In a city gripped by sickness, food is more than sustenance. It's resistance. A way to say I'm still here. And tonight, as you curl beneath a market awning with apple core and saffron crumbs in your pocket, you feel, if only faintly, something like peace. You wake to the sound of someone hammering boards over a nearby door. The rhythm is steady, almost thoughtful, as if sealing off a sick room were just another morning chore like drawing water or feeding chickens. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but London's already humming in that strange new way, quieter, slower, somehow denser with breath you can't see. You rise stiffly and stretch. Your muscles are sore from sleeping on stone. Your breath clouds in the cool air. You sniff the street, not entirely unpleasant this morning, thanks to the nearby bakery's oven having miraculously survived the past week. Someone inside is baking barley bread. You'd give up your last chestnut for a heel of it. You keep moving, trying to rub life into your arms. You're on the edge of Covent Garden now, and even though the flower sellers are long gone, you can almost imagine them violets, in hand roses and buckets, shouting prices through mouths full of pins. Instead, you see another sort of merchant, a boy maybe 10 offering plague rations. You ask what's in them. Mostly oats, he shrugs. Sometimes beans. Depends what I find. You take a packet. The oats are chewy, damp, and raw. He must have soaked them overnight. but they fill your stomach and you appreciate the gritty texture. There's even a hint of nutmeg somehow. You raise an eyebrow and the boy grins. Cook used to work at a manor, he says, pinched the spice box before she ran. This is the new economy, barter, and boldness. Spices, once a show of wealth and empire, now show up in the strangest hands. Clove-studded oranges to hang in sick rooms, sprigs of rosemary tucked into cloaks. Historians still argue whether these plague herbs offered any real protection or just made people feel less helpless. Either way, they turned kitchens into medicine cabinets. You walk on and pass what used to be a public cookshop. The shutters are open and a single pan sits on the coals. Inside is a thick porridge bubbling gently. A woman nods at you. Barley and leeks, she says. Free if you help stir. You do. The handle is hot and the mixture heavy. She adds a pinch of dried thyme. Keeps the air clean, she mutters. You don't argue. As you stir, she tells you about her brother who once made his living importing cinnamon from Dutch ships. Now he's got a sore throat and a rosary, she says with a half laugh. Same thing some days. You trade stories for food, yours half true, hers half funny. When she ladles you a scoop of porridge, it's thick and earthy. You eat with both hands wrapped around the bowl. It's hot enough to make your eyes water. Further down the road, you encounter a different smell. Sweet, sharp, unfamiliar. A man is boiling quince in sugar syrup, the pan set up precariously over a street grate. You're surprised he found sugar. He nods toward a crumbling mansion. They're dead, he says. Didn't mind me taking a lump or two. You try a piece. It tastes like distant summers, all sunshine and perfume. Quince was a fruit of ceremony, once laid out for nobles turned into marmalade for queens. Now it's street food for survivors. You chew slowly, savoring every bite. Want to help with the rind, he asks. You nod. As you slice sticky strips of quince peel, he tells you about the other things he's tried to candy: carrots, beets, even parsnips. They never quite take, he admits, but it gives you something to do. He offers you a strip of carrot sugared to oblivion. It's chewy, but it makes you smile. Later, you stop to watch a girl grinding something with a mortar and pestle. It smells sharp like mustard. Radish seeds, she explains, mixed with vinegar. You spread it on stale bread and pretend it's meat. You try it. The burn shoots up your nose like a trumpet blast. Your eyes water. You laugh through the sting. It's better with cabbage, she assures you, but that's harder to find now. Root vegetables, turnips, carrots, onions still arrive from country farms smuggled in under straw and lies. If you're lucky, you might get a bag for a song. If not, you steal one. Everyone steals now a little. Even the preacher at St. Martin's was caught pocketing walnuts last week. You chew your mustard bread and lean against a wall covered in death notices. Hand-scrawled names, little prayers, black crosses. Your mustard burns less now. Maybe you're just getting used to it. A passing woman taps your shoulder. Soup tonight, she whispers. At the old brewer's. Bring herbs if you've got any. You nod. You've got half a rosemary sprig and a pinch of marjoram stolen from a windowsill. It'll do. You head toward the brewer's place near the river, an old alehouse long dry now hosting what you might call communal dinners. Not quite charity, not quite business, just warmth. Inside, the air is thick with steam and humanity. Someone's chopped onions. Someone else brought dried mushrooms. You add your herbs. A man stirs with a mop handle. It's not sanitary. It's not elegant. It's not bad. You sit with a bowl of the resulting stew thick with barley and questionable meat. Maybe pigeon. Maybe not. You ask no questions. Someone sings softly in the corner. A lullaby. The bowl warms your hands. The song warms your mind. You look around and realize everyone here looks a little better after eating. Paler maybe, but calmer. London is starving, but not dead. Not yet. Outside, the sky bruises into evening. The Thames glimmers behind the rooftops. You lick the last of the stew from your spoon and breathe out slowly. It's only dinner, but it feels like a feast. You sleep in a pile of old sacks near the brewer's hearth, the smell of soup still clinging to your hair. By morning, the warmth is gone, but your belly is full enough that you don't wake shaking. You sit up slowly, head resting against a barrel, and listen to the sounds of London trying to pretend it's still a city. A rooster crows somewhere, someone still thinks they'll get eggs. A cart creaks past, loaded not with goods but with dry rushes for flooring. The straw helps keep down the smell at least for a day or two. You wander into the narrow back lanes near Holborn. These alleys once thrived with cooks, bakers, sellers of pies and sugared almonds. You remember the scent of roast chestnuts around Christmas time. Now there's just the faint odor of boiled water and burned grain. But then you hear it, a soft sizzling, a comforting whisper of fat on a pan. Your nose twitches like a curious dog. You follow the scent to a crumbling shop front where an elderly woman stands over a fire pit. Her pan is battered, the edges warped from years of use, but it holds something truly magical. Fried flat cakes made from flour water, and judging by the smell, a touch of onion or garlic. You ask what it is. Whatever's left, she says cheerfully. Mostly peas mashed and dried. Bit of lard if I'm lucky. She offers you one in exchange for help stoking the fire. You crouch beside the coals, feeding in bits of broken crate wood. The fire flares and the cakes bubble. They're crispy on the outside, soft in the middle. You burn your fingers and laugh. She tells you how she used to make pigeon pies for a judge every Thursday without fail. Fat ones with bacon and prunes, she sighs. He's probably eating paper now like the rest of us. Historians still argue whether these adaptations in food culture were driven more by ingenuity or pure desperation. You'd say both. You walk with the woman to a nearby shed where she stores jars of pickled vegetables. Beets, turnips, even green walnuts suspended in murky liquid. Old habits die hard, she grins. If you pickle everything, you don't notice how bland it is. You try a slice of pickled beet. It tastes of salt and patience. Elsewhere in the city, makeshift kitchens have sprung up where churches used to serve wine and wafers. The faithful have found new rituals, boiling dandelion roots, grinding chestnuts into flour, roasting marrow bones until they shatter into broth. At a shuttered convent, you watch a group of nuns steeping dried apple peels in warm ale to make a sort of fruit tea. One offers you a sip. It's tart, cloudy, and oddly refreshing. You thank her and move on. Lunch, if you can call it that, is a handful of roasted broad beans, dry, crunchy, and hard as small stones. You buy them from a chimney sweep who's also hawking rat pies, which thankfully he does not expect you to actually purchase. You'd be surprised, he says, what people will pay for the illusion of meat. Further down the alley, you spot a girl with a basket of wild green sorrel dandelion leaves, maybe even a few precious sprigs of mint. She's charging 2 buttons per bunch, which feels steep, but you've got nothing else planned today, and mint is mint. You trade her one of your 2 wooden coat toggles. She pockets it quickly and hands over the greens. You chew on a dandelion stem as you walk. It's bitter, but it tastes of spring, and your jaw enjoys the work. You make your way toward the Thames again, hoping for something heartier by the docks. Fishermen even now sometimes haul in eels. Eels are oddly plague-proof, slippery, reliable, and nearly impossible to poison. They've become London's quiet lifeline. You sit near a stone bridge watching a boy gut an eel with a butter knife. He tosses the innards to the gulls and wraps the meat in cabbage leaves. His fire is just a few coals and a bit of string holding up a pot. You ask for a bite. He says, half a story. So you tell him about the woman and her pickled beets, and in exchange you get a strip of grilled eel wrapped in cabbage. It's salty, smoky, and makes your mouth water. Could do with vinegar, he mutters. You agree. That night, you find yourself near an apothecary's shop long since looted, though someone has stacked dried herbs in the windows: chamomile, hyssop, sage. These aren't food exactly, but people are brewing them into broths, teas, even soups when they're desperate. Inside, a young man is boiling a mixture of mint and thyme in rainwater. For digestion, he claims. And dreaming. You nod, not entirely convinced, but take a ladleful. The mint is bracing. The thyme lingers in your nose. You sip slowly and imagine yourself somewhere far from plague-choked London. Maybe a quiet glen in Sussex. Maybe a kitchen with real bread and butter. Maybe anywhere with a cow. The man tells you his mother used to bake honey cakes, little rounds flavored with orange peel and rose water. We had a beehive once, he says, before the smoke got them. Historians still argue whether that smoke was fog or filth, he adds with a smile. I say both. You finish the tea and leave him to his dreaming pot. By now your stomach feels calm, your limbs are loose, and the stars have begun to peep through the soot-smeared sky. You walk slowly the way people do when they're full enough to think about other things like songs or stories or sleep. As you reach the edge of town, you see a group gathered around a fire. They're roasting chestnuts, real ones. You blink thinking you must be dreaming. But no, someone must have kept a stash, or stolen one, or traded something precious. You sit with them quietly. One chestnut is passed to you. It's warm, mealy sweet. A small luxury in a season of salt and sorrow. You lean back and let the flavor melt on your tongue. You wake on the outskirts of the city where the fields used to begin, though now they're littered with abandoned carts, broken furniture, and the stray footprints of people who left and never came back. The air feels cleaner here, if only slightly. It carries the whisper of open sky instead of soot. You stretch your legs, stomach surprisingly settled after yesterday's street food adventure. Pickled things, leafy things, eel things. Not bad all told. Today you're on the hunt for something more elusive milk. Or more realistically, something pretending to be milk. You head toward the ruins of what was once a proper dairy district. Finsbury, perhaps. The signs are still there, painted cows, wooden churns. No cows in sight, though. Just the faint smell of something sour. A child darts past you carrying a jug as if it contains the crown jewels. Whey, she shouts, grinning. Fresh whey, you call after her, but she's gone. That's the thing with dairy. When it appears, it vanishes just as quickly. You find an old woman near a stable. She's boiling a pot of something white and lumpy. It smells of salt and sheep. She tells you it's clabber, a kind of naturally soured milk, thick as pudding with the consistency of wallpaper paste. You wrinkle your nose, but she laughs. Better than eating chalk and nearly as nutritious. She lets you try a spoonful. It's tangy, oddly creamy, with a curious fizz on the tongue. She's managed this by keeping one very old, very stubborn goat. The goat watches you now, eyes full of ancient judgment, chewing the corner of someone's discarded prayer book. I call her Elizabeth, the woman says proudly, Queen of Curds. You share a soft moment beside the goat eating lukewarm clabber from a cracked bowl. Elizabeth huffs. You wonder if she knows she's keeping humans alive one dollop at a time. Historians still argue whether urban livestock like Elizabeth were tolerated, smuggled, or simply ignored during plague times. Either way, there were more goats in London in 1665 than anyone wants to admit. After your brief dairy interlude, you make your way back toward the river. The sun peeks out briefly, just enough warmth to stir hunger again. You hear someone calling pudding savory pudding, which sounds suspiciously optimistic. You follow the sound to a boy no older than 10, standing by a steaming tin bucket. Inside, you find what might technically qualify as pudding oats, sweat scraps of marrow, and a generous pinch of pennyroyal. It's steaming and surprisingly fragrant. You hand over a few buttons, your last ones, and receive a generous ladleful. He watches you eat with pride. My mum used to make it with blood, he says wistfully. But that's harder to come by now. You nod, savoring the warmth, the stick-to-your-ribs texture. You wouldn't call it delicious, but it's comforting, like eating memories of real food. As you move along the Thames, you pass a group of boys fishing for eels. You recognize one from yesterday, the cabbage wrap chef. He gives you a wink and lifts a squirming eel from the water. Still biting, he says. You pause to help them untangle their lines. One boy tells you about a sugar dealer near Bishopsgate, a former pastry chef who now trades spoonfuls of molasses like they're gold dust. You bring him dried fruit or linen, he says, and he'll sweeten your porridge. You're tempted? A little sweetness would go a long way. Instead, you make your way toward Spitalfields, where the Huguenots once lived. The air is thick with thread and dust. Most of the silk weavers are gone now, but a few families still bake odd things in the mornings, flat, dense rounds flavored with caraway or fennel seed. You find a man with flour on his sleeves and despair in his eyes. He offers you a biscuit the size of your palm. Seed cake, he says. What's left of it? It's dry, yes, but the flavor is bright and strange. You chew slowly, savoring the burst of anise, and imagine a time when this city smelled of sugar and spice instead of lie and fear. You thank him and move on. Further down the lane, a sign catches your eye, soup for quiet mouths. You follow the arrow into a back garden where 3 widows are stirring a massive pot over a stone fire. The ingredients are anonymous root vegetables, maybe beans, a dash of something green. One woman gives you a ladleful and pats your hand. Eat slow. Tastes better that way. You sit beneath a figless fig tree and sip the soup. It's thin but warm, and the salt cuts the monotony. You find a single sliver of carrot and feel victorious. A man beside you is eating a heel of bread dipped in the same broth. He tells you he used to make cheese from almond milk. Tasted like linen, he says, but people loved it. Historians still argue whether these makeshift alternatives like almond cheese or oat gruel were creative culinary adaptations or just the last gasps of a starving people. Maybe both. Maybe that's what London is now, the city of almost was and might have been. You lean back and close your eyes for a moment. The soup settles in your belly like a stone, but a friendly one. As dusk falls, you return to the same stone bridge where you shared eel the night before. This time the boy has made something new, eel jelly. It wobbles unnervingly but smells rich. He swears it will stick to your ribs for days. You try it. It's chewy. You nod politely and decide to pretend it was excellent. Your day ends with a cup of warm water flavored with dried rose hips. A woman with cracked hands offers it to you, whispering, "For the cold nights," keeps the cough away. You sip slowly, the floral tang curling across your tongue. The stars blink above the smoke. Somewhere a goat bleats, and you wonder again what breakfast might be like tomorrow. The morning greets you with a damp breeze that carries a faint smell of ash bread crusts and something like boiled wool. You stir beneath your borrowed blanket, half hoping for a miracle breakfast, half expecting a dead rat. But instead, today starts with a sound, the sharp clap of clogs against stone, and a voice calling, "Pies, not meat, but pies." You sit up groggily and make your way toward the commotion. A woman stands beside a barrel lifting out tiny, lopsided hand pies wrapped in brown cloth. Her apron is stained, and her eyes are too tired to lie. "Root and rind," she mutters, handing one to a man with no shoes. "Mostly turnip, bit of radish, some oat flour if you're lucky." You get in line. When it's your turn, she looks you over, then hands you 2. "You've got plague face," she says gently, thin and ghosty. "Eat both." The pies are dense, chewy, and slightly peppery, flavored with desperation and maybe a touch of thistle. Still, the warmth in your hands feels like an early Christmas. These makeshift pies were common during plague times. No meat, but enough starch to trick the belly. Historians still argue whether turnips were beloved or merely tolerated. The people of 1665 weren't keeping diaries about taste. You pass a small chapel where someone has drawn chalk arrows on the walls, directions to porridge for the God-fearing. You follow, partly curious, partly hungry. The line outside is orderly, quiet. People speak in murmurs. Inside, a priest stirs a cauldron of something beige. "Blessed oats," he says solemnly, and a hint of rosemary. You receive your bowl. It's bland but filling with a rare sprig of herb, floating like a boat on a beige sea. The pews have become dining benches. You sit between 2 women who knit silently while they eat. You learn that rosemary in 1665 was prized not just for flavor, but for its supposed ability to ward off the plague. Tucked into masks, hung above doors, stirred into food, it was the duct tape of the 17th century. You finish your bowl and thank the priest. He offers you a small twist of dried herbs wrapped in a page from a broken hymnal. For tea, he says, or bathing, whichever comes first. Outside, the world continues. You pass a boy roasting chestnuts over a brazier, though they smell more like acorns. He grins when he sees you. They're half worm, half smoke, he shouts cheerfully. 2 farthings for a handful. You politely decline. Instead, you wander toward what used to be the fancy part of town. Clerkenwell, maybe. The homes are shuttered doors painted with red X's, warning symbols of infection. But you spot movement in a window. An elderly man leans out and waves. You hungry? You nod. He lowers a basket on a rope. Inside, a chunk of something brown and sticky wrapped in linen. Treacle loaf, he says proudly, was my wife's recipe, stale as judgment but still sweet. You sit beneath his window and nibble the loaf. It's stiff as leather but oddly satisfying. The treacle, black as night and just as bitter, clings to your teeth. You imagine the effort it took to make something that sweet in a time this bitter. In exchange, you leave the herb bundle from the priest on the windowsill. He sees it, nods solemnly. No words needed. Midday now, and the sun is playing tricks, shining just enough to make everything seem cleaner, but not enough to dry the streets. You feel a trickle of hope. Then your stomach growls again. You follow a rumor soup near the printworks. You find it barely. A boy stirs a pot of something gray beside a toppled stack of pamphlets, reading God's Wrath or Man's Folly. The soup is watery, but inside float surprises, barley grains, maybe lentils, and what might be a slice of onion. It's hot. That's enough. He tells you the soup is made from Sunday scraps. Everything unspoiled from yesterday's meals goes in. Nothing is wasted. You sip and nod. He smiles. My gran says the best food is just leftovers that had ambition. Later, as you walk down Bread Street, ironic, given there's no bread in sight, you spot a young woman hammering something flat on a plank. Seed wafers, she says, for tea or teeth. She hands you one. It's the size of your palm, dotted with fennel-crushed lavender and what looks like sand. Made from crushed stale biscuits and hope. You bite in. It's like chewing a prayer, dry, earthy, strange, but again, filling. You end your day sitting beside a fountain that hasn't run in weeks. The stone is cool and a cat dozes near your feet. A woman approaches carrying a copper pot and 2 mugs. Malt tea, she says. Barley and chicory. No leaves, but it'll trick the tongue. You accept gratefully. The brew is bitter, nutty, warm. It feels like something remembered rather than tasted. Something your ancestors might have sipped after burying their 4th pig of the year. She sits beside you, sipping in silence. And for a few quiet moments, you both pretend the city smells like spring again. You wake up colder than you remember falling asleep. The stone beneath your back has stolen most of your body heat, and the mist has returned, this time thicker and wetter, like soup gone wrong. It smells faintly of old beer, wet iron, and something like wet dog left in a crypt. Your stomach grumbles, but not from hunger this time, it's regret. Maybe that 3rd turnip pie wasn't as innocent as it looked. Still, you stand and stretch. Time to find breakfast, or at least something that can pretend to be breakfast. A soft bell chimes in the distance. That usually means monks, or a grocer with moral ambition. You shuffle toward the sound and arrive at a small courtyard where a woman is arranging baskets of dried goods. No prices, just names written in chalk on scraps of wood. Samphire wilt sweetmeat, Peel's old tansy bites, still legal. She sees you eyeing the tansy bites. Tansies for clearing the gut and confusing your enemies, she says. Also for pudding if you're feeling brave. You choose the safest looking thing, a bundle of candied orange peels. They crunch like sweet twigs and coat your mouth in something close to hope. Once a luxury, now survival candy. Across the square, a man is selling something he calls sea flower cakes. You approach cautiously. Ground limpets, he explains, mixed with egg and dried kelp. Don't ask how I got the egg. You nod slowly and take one. It's chewy, salty, and oddly chewy again. He watches you chew and adds, some say Queen Elizabeth ate these in exile. Probably didn't, but I like the idea. Historians still debate how much exotic coastal food made it into inland London during the plague. Trade was disrupted, but smugglers were inventive, and sometimes desperate people are remarkably good at logistics. You carry on pocketing the last bit of peel for later. A boy offers to sell you drinking vinegar flavored with sage and something labeled only garden bitter. You try a sip. Your eyebrows attempt to flee your face, but your throat thanks you for the jolt. He grins, cures scurvy, or gives you something else to think about. Mid-morning brings a sudden clanging of bells, not church ones, but hand bells rung by a man in layers of gray linen shouting, "Bring out your dead." You step aside. The cart creaks by full of still bodies beneath a tarp. You press the candied peel to your tongue and try to focus on sweetness. A few streets later, the scent of yeast draws you toward what looks like a former tavern. A chalk sign says, "Brewer's Gruel 1 tankard." You knock. A tired man answers. "We steep the mash after the wort's drawn off," he explains. "Still has some warmth in it. Better than water." You hand over a farthing. He gives you a wooden tankard filled with a warm, cloudy liquid. It smells faintly of barley feed and ghost dreams. You sip. It's thin, but it warms your core. "It used to be for pigs," he says, half proud. This sort of brewer's gruel was real, a byproduct of beer making, occasionally consumed by the desperate or the frugal. Nutritionally, arguable. But in plague times, arguing with hunger rarely won. Later you pass an alley where children crouch beside a fire, roasting what looks like petals. One of them waves a charred tulip at you. "Petal crisps," she says. "Found him in the rector's yard. His cat's dead, but the flowers are fine." You don't have the heart to say no. The crisp tastes floral, smoky, confusing. But there's salt on it somehow, and that helps. Somewhere near the Thames, a man in a cloak invites you to sample his venison stew. You raise an eyebrow. "It's not venison," he admits, "but it's stewed." You ask what's in it. He hesitates. Mostly beans. A few scraps of cheese. Bit of ale. Might have been squirrel once. You try it anyway. It's thick, peppery, surprisingly edible. "Everything tastes like meat if you boil it long enough," he says cheerfully. You sit by the river afterward, watching the gray water drift past. A boat rows slowly by, piled high with sacks of grain and 2 suspiciously quiet chickens. Someone on the dock whispers about pie scrap stew in a nearby lodging house. You follow your nose and find a woman boiling crusts and drippings with cabbage and stale herbs. It smells weirdly inviting. You sit on the floor and take a bowl. "I call it yesterdish," she says proudly. "Yesterday's everything. It's actually lovely." She tells you about her aunt who swore by mustard plasters and marrow custard. Only one of those was for eating, she says. You thank her and she hands you a cloth pouch. For later, she says, "Dried peas and elderflower, good for tea." Or a soft rattle if you get bored. The sky darkens, clouds roll in. You find a dry step to sit on and nibble one last piece of petal crisp. It crumbles between your fingers like ashes, but it tastes like surviving. A boy walks past carrying a single leek. He holds it like a sword. "This is dinner," he declares proudly. "All of it." You salute him with your crust. Tomorrow maybe you'll find leek soup. Tonight you sleep with a stomach half full and a mouth that still tastes faintly of tulip and barley. And for now, that's enough. You wake to something rare silence. No cries, no bells, no coughing neighbors. Just the damp hush of a London street holding its breath. The sky is pewter gray, thick with the promise of drizzle, and the air feels like it's pressing gently against your skin as though trying to convince you to stay in bed. But you're already sitting up on the wooden floor of a friend's flat, well, maybe not a friend, more like someone who forgot to lock their door. The smell of cabbage lingers in the room. You blink and notice a bowl on the table filled with what appears to be water and bits of stale bread. Floating crusts, as the locals call it. You slurp a spoonful. It tastes like cold regret and mild salt. Still, it's food. Out on the street, things are strangely calm. A few shuttered shops, the distant thud of hooves from a courier's horse, and the familiar caw of crows overhead. You pass a notice pinned to a post. "This house quarantined. May God have mercy." You glance at the window shuttered tight. Someone's written a recipe on the wood in chalk. Boil barley. Strain. Add honey if alive. Drink warm. You move on. Mid-morning brings the smell of roasting chestnuts, rare given the season and the shortages. You find the source, a woman with a blackened pan tossing the nuts with bare fingers. She offers you 3 for a penny. You bite into one, nearly burning your tongue. The warmth is worth it. They keep better than bread, she says. And squirrels won't steal what you roast. Chestnuts weren't a staple, but in times like these, they were gold. Londoners adapted, replacing wheat with acorns, oats with turnip flour, and breakfast with anything vaguely chewable. Later, you stumble into a curious market, not official, not quite illegal. It's tucked behind a churchyard where a dozen vendors have spread their wares on blankets, jars of pickled eel, bunches of wild garlic, small cakes made of dried apple and oat dust. One woman leans close and whispers, "I have sugar." Your heart skips. She pulls out a tiny pouch tied with twine. 2 pennies, she says. You don't ask how she got it. Sugar during the plague was rare and treasured, sometimes traded like currency. Not always for eating, sometimes mixed into tonics or bribes. As you nibble a sliver, a man offers you a small clay cup filled with a viscous gray liquid. Plague tonic, he announces. Turpentine, vinegar, and garlic clears the body and the soul. You hand it back, shaking your head. He shrugs. More for me. Historians still argue whether these plague tonics ever helped anyone, but they were sold by the hundreds, offered with cheerful claims and no refunds. By noon, the fog lifts just enough for sunlight to stab through. You wander toward a courtyard where smoke curls from a half-collapsed chimney. Inside, a family is gathered around a pot. A child offers you a wooden spoon. "Raisin pottage," she says proudly. You peer into the pot. It's a beige mush speckled with raisins, and if your eyes don't deceive you, onion. You take a taste. It's oddly good. "Our mum made it up," the child says. Says it's for good luck. Some people turn to ritual foods during the plague, eating certain combinations to ward off illness, or simply to feel like anything made sense. You thank them and leave behind a coin. As you walk, a scent catches your nose, smoke but sweeter. You follow it to a booth where someone is burning dried rosemary. A pot of thin soup bubbles beside it. The cook sees you eyeing the fire. "Smoke's for the lungs," she says. "Soup's for the belly." You take a bowl. It's full of lentils, garlic skins, and something she calls garden scraps. It tastes earthy and surprisingly rich. "Smoked soup," she declares, fills you up twice, once from the soup, once from the story. She points to a chalkboard. Written on it, "Today's soup: lentils, 7 garlic, ends handful. Water lots, hope to taste." You slurp it slowly, watching a few birds squabble over a potato peel. You think about how many people in this city are making meals from memory, from scraps, from sheer willpower. By late afternoon, you pass a boy standing on a box, shouting, "Pickled cow tongue cures boredom." You're not entirely sure that's true, but curiosity wins. It's briny, chewy, and absolutely unforgettable, possibly in a bad way. Still chewing, you pass a woman selling pies from a crate. "Rat-free today," she says brightly. You pass on the pies, just in case. Food safety, as you might imagine, was less than ideal in 1665. With many officials dead or missing, regulations collapsed. People had to trust their noses and sometimes ignore them. You sit for a moment beside a quiet canal. Someone has scrawled graffiti on the stone, "Better a worm in your apple than none at all." You're not sure if it's a proverb or a warning. The last stop of the day is a shadowy alley where a man brews what he calls plague punch. He pours you a steaming mug. It's cider, vinegar, cloves, and whatever fruit I didn't eat this week. You sip. It's spicy, tangy, and strangely comforting. Your cheeks warm. He raises his own mug. "To not dying today." You clink mugs with him and smile. As twilight settles over the rooftops, you head back toward your temporary refuge, a crust of chestnut cake in your pocket, your belly full of things no one would have paid for a year ago, but now feel like feasts. It's early evening now, and you're walking slowly. Not because you're tired, although you definitely are, but because London has taken on a strange, almost magical stillness. The setting sun casts long shadows, and the scent of smoke, damp stone, and roasting onions hangs in the air like a sleepy perfume. Somewhere behind you, a lute is being tuned, or maybe mistuned. Hard to say. Your path leads you into a parish square where several families have gathered around a communal fire. One woman ladles something into clay bowls. You recognize the smell, immediately stewed leeks. Familiar, comforting. In a time when nothing is guaranteed, leek stew is practically a friend. You're handed a bowl without question. The woman gestures toward the fire. "We're pretending it's a feast," she says. "Even got a turnip crown." Sure enough, one of the children is wearing a carved turnip like a hat. It wobbles as he dances. As you sip the stew, simple, warm, barely salted, you hear someone reciting rhymes. Not nursery rhymes exactly, but recipes disguised as poems. One begins, "Peel the root and boil it twice. Add broth if you're feeling nice. If you're lucky, herbs appear. If not, just call it plague year cheer." You smile. There's something beautiful about people weaving survival into song. And song, it turns out, is everywhere tonight. A man nearby hums as he rolls dough on a wooden board. It's barley dough flattened and charred on a skillet over the fire. He breaks off a piece and offers it. "Flat cakes," he says. "Because everything's flat lately, our gardens, our wallets, our moods." The cake tastes smoky, faintly bitter, but deeply grounding. Food in plague time is not about luxury. It's about anchoring yourself in something tangible, something bite-sized and ideally chewable. Historians still debate whether shared meals like these helped curb social unrest. Some say they built neighborly solidarity. Others argue they just spread germs faster. Either way, they existed provisional, imperfect human. You stay a while by the fire belly, warm senses softening. Someone passes a basket of dried apples. A rare treat. You take two and tuck one into your sleeve for later. As night falls, the city exhales. There's less fear in the air now, more weariness. A man walks by holding a pot of something steaming. You ask what it is. "Bread porridge," he says. "Boiled stale loaves, sometimes with raisins, tonight with prayer." You nod. That checks out. He continues down the road, his spoon tapping the rim of the pot like a sleepy metronome. You take a turn into another lane and find a peculiar sight. A woman standing behind a makeshift table lined with tiny wooden bowls. Each holds a different item. Gooseberries, quince jam, pickled eggs, even something labeled plum essence, not actual plums. "This one's a game," she says. "You pick a bowl, I tell you a story." You choose one filled with something green and gelatinous. "Minted pea mash," she grins. "Traded 3 buttons for it. Want the tail." You nod, mouthful of cool minty starch. "So a sailor brought a bag of peas from Amsterdam last year." She begins. "Planted them. They flourished. Then the rats found them. He fenced the patch with broken forks and cursed in Dutch for a month." You laugh softly. She continues. "He saved enough for 10 bowls. You've just eaten number 9. Somehow that feels like an honor." Stories like these aren't in textbooks, but they tell you more about survival than any royal decree or census ever could. Food memory, some scholars say, is as resilient as oral tradition. People remember what filled their mouths in the hardest times, even if it was just soup and sarcasm. Back in the direction of your makeshift lodging, you pass a narrow window from which someone is lowering a basket on a rope. Inside is a bundle of dried sage and what looks like oat biscuits. Below, a girl waves up and calls Tanan. You can't help but smile. Even in plague times, the granny supply chain remains unbroken. Near the river, you spot a group of washerwomen. They're sitting on overturned buckets, munching on roasted parsnips wrapped in rags. One offers you a piece. "Soft in the middle, like my husband," she quips. The parsnip is indeed soft, sweet with a touch of charcoal. You nod in appreciation. They laugh and keep eating. One of them hums a lullaby. And suddenly you're hit with a wave of calm. Not joy exactly, but a deep, slow sort of okayness. Your belly is full. You've eaten leek, barley, pea mash, parsnips, and pickled something. You're not sick, not tonight. You sit by the river's edge watching lanterns float past in boats tied loosely to the dock. Somewhere a cat knocks over a clay pot. Somewhere else someone snores. You reach into your sleeve and nibble the dried apple you saved earlier. It's chewy, a little tart, but sweet in a way that catches you off guard. Like memory, you lie back on the cold stone and close your eyes. For a moment the city is quiet. The hunger is quiet. Even the fear is quiet. Tomorrow the fires will burn again, and the bells may toll. But tonight you wait. You wake early, well, not exactly wake. You never quite fell asleep on the stone bench by the riverbank, but you drifted eyes half closed, dreaming with your ears. The city muttered all night in its strange plague year language, distant cartwheels, the whimper of dogs, a lute string breaking mid-chord, someone arguing with a ghost. Now, with the soft blue of morning brushing the Thames, you rise and stretch your legs. Your back protests. Your belly grumbles. The food you ate yesterday, barley cakes, leeks, mint mash, dried apple, is already a distant memory. Hunger, like the fog, always returns. You walk until you find a woman sitting beside a stall made of old crates and sailcloth. She's slicing something that smells like onions but looks like artichokes. Jerusalem artichokes, she explains, handing you a sliver. Boiled till soft, then fried in bacon drippings if you can find any. You chew thoughtfully. It's earthy, nutty, surprisingly comforting. The kind of thing you'd imagine a wizard might eat if he were in hiding. She waves a hand toward a pot simmering nearby. I call it Tuesday soup, she says, because I put it on Monday and eat it till Thursday. You glance inside bits of lentil, a ribbon of beetroot, one lonely bean. Scholars still debate the exact recipes used by working-class households during the plague, mostly because no one wrote them down. What little we know comes from scraps of household notes, merchant records, and that one apprentice who doodled turnip stew in the margin of a sermon. Still, there's enough to paint a picture. Root vegetables ruled the day. Turnips, parsnips, carrots, anything you could bury, forget, and dig up later. And cabbage. Cabbage everywhere. Braised, stewed, soured into pickles. The 1665 diet might well be sponsored by cabbage. You walk on encountering a merchant selling a strange pale loaf. Maize bread, he says. Cornmeal from the colonies. Not many like it. Too gritty. You take a bite. He's right. It crumbles like gravel, but it fills your mouth, your stomach, your sense of the day having truly begun. You pass a beggar holding a wooden sign, will trade stories for scraps. You sit beside him, handing over your last crust. He grins a mostly toothless grin. Did you know, he begins, that some folks in the countryside swore by hedgehog stew? You blink. Catch a hedgehog, wrap it in clay, roast it whole. When the clay cracks, the spines come off with it. What's left is meat sweeter than rabbit. You nod slowly. You will absolutely not be trying this, but you're grateful for the image. Food taboos and folk traditions flourished during plague times. In parts of Wales, old women claimed boiled nettles could ward off fever. In rural France, they swore by snail broth. And in East London, a whisper went around that eating eel on the full moon would grant immunity. Historians still argue whether such food superstitions functioned as coping mechanisms or genuine belief your memory reminds you. Back in town, a row of apprentices gathers near a doorway, each holding a cup of some thick beige liquid. Posset one says, offering you a taste. Hot milk with ale and spices. Makes you sleepy, or drunk, or both. It tastes like bread pudding and regret. Another apprentice chuckles. We made one with wormwood once. Put us in bed for 2 days. You mean under the bed, someone else mutters. It's easy to forget here in the soot and soup smells that this is a city at war with itself, rich versus poor, doctor versus apothecary, rumor versus reason. Case in point, a nearby pamphlet nailed to a tavern door reads, "All ye who boil garlic are safe from plague." Someone's crossed out garlic and written God. Someone else added goose fat. Welcome to early public health messaging. By noon, the streets are humming again. You follow a group of children into a courtyard where an older woman, possibly their grandmother, possibly just bold, is handing out tiny squares of spiced biscuit. Made with caraway and a prayer, she says. Don't ask what else. You bite. It's dry but aromatic, like the ghost of a cookie. She nods approvingly. That'll last you the week if you're careful. You wander next into a quieter alley. A man sits cross-legged with a tray of dried herbs, sage, marjoram, thyme, and something labeled comfort root. He explains in a tone suggesting he's half selling and half proselytizing that certain herbs invite good humors into the body. Not humor like laughter, though heaven knows we need it, but in the medieval medical sense, balance of the body's four fluids. Eat too much salted meat and your black bile acts up, he warns. Best chew thyme. You nod solemnly. You have no idea what your bile is doing, but you'd rather not annoy it. In the next lane, a boy drags a basket behind him. Inside are fat lumps of something squishy and pale. Suit dumplings, he says. Made too many. Want one? You hesitate. Suet is rendered beef fat. Dumplings are comfort incarnate. The combination, surprisingly good. Dense, warm, and for some reason, vaguely hopeful. As you finish chewing, the boy adds, "We had a sweet fight once." Mom was furious. You can imagine it, a family flinging fat lumps at each other, laughing until they cried, or crying until they laughed. It's hard to tell the difference these days. You pass a churchyard where someone's selling pickled herring out of a barrel. From Norway, he boasts, or possibly Norfolk. Labels rubbed off. You decline. You're not that hungry. The bells chime again. You've eaten better than most today. And yet the hunger lingers, not for food necessarily, but for normalcy, for meals that come with linen and laughter, for a world where you don't have to sniff everything twice. Still, your feet are moving and your belly's not empty. And on plague year terms, that's a win. Afternoon settles in like a warm, slightly tipsy uncle, unexpected, a bit loud, and smelling faintly of vinegar and soap. The sun peeks from behind the usual pewter-colored clouds, casting crooked shadows through the soot-stained windows of London's plague-sick streets. You find yourself standing beside a crooked stall shaded by a canopy that might once have been a curtain. It advertises plague-proof pickles in shaky, hopeful handwriting. A teenager in a soup-stained apron invites you closer. "Pickled anything, really," he explains, holding up jars full of suspiciously floating shapes. "Onions, walnuts, plums, eggs, maybe a beet if you're lucky." Pickling, as you know, is more than just preservation. It's tradition, necessity, and during the plague, a minor form of alchemy. Households stuffed anything they couldn't cook quickly into jars of vinegar, hoping thyme and sourness would keep the illness at bay. You're handed a pickled walnut. It's black, soft, and looks slightly haunted. You chew anyway. It tastes like salty regret, and something your grandmother might swear by. The boy beams. From behind him, a woman emerges carrying a wide basket of leaf-wrapped parcels. "Pigeon pies," she says, grinning. But no pigeon. Mushrooms and oats. Sometimes a bit of cured pork fat if I catch my brother in a good mood. You accept one. The pastry crumbles in your fingers, buttery and warm from the sun. The filling is rich with thyme and something smokier. You ask, mouth full, what gives it that taste. "Don't ask," she says. You decide not to. As you meander through the afternoon bustle, the smells of the city begin to layer like sediment tar from the shipyards, roasting barley. From a nearby brew house, someone boiling sugar in a pan, far too small for the bubbling mess inside it. This is when you pass a pair of schoolboys poking at a lump of something gelatinous in a cart. A banner reads, "Calf's foot jelly for delicate stomachs." One boy whispers, "My uncle swears it fixed his gout." The other adds, "And his limp and his bad luck at cards." Calf's foot jelly, you remember, is not for the faint of palate. It's made by simmering the hooves of young cattle until the collagen renders into a glistening goo. Sweeten it with sugar, spike it with sherry, and you've got yourself what passed for a delicacy in 1665. Historians still argue whether it was truly prized for its taste or just for the way it wobbled so cheerfully at funerals. Further down the road, an old man is peddling dried seaweed wrapped in wax paper. Imported from Scotland, he claims. Boil it, mash it, spread it on bread. Good for the nerves. You take a strip and chew. It's like licking the ocean floor. A strange calm spreads through your chest. Either he's right or you've just numbed your tongue. In a quiet courtyard, a woman sings while stirring an enormous iron pot. Children gather round each holding a tin bowl. The melody drifts above the rooftops, full of lullaby lilt and lullaby lies. You edge closer. Peas pudding, she tells you. Split peas, onion, a little lard. Stir it enough and the worries settle. You nod, accepting a ladleful. It's warm, thick, humble. The kind of food that makes you remember you're still here, still human. Suddenly, the sound of a cracked bell echoes from St. Dunstan's. It's not the death bell this time, just a signal soup line forming near the parish well. You join the slow shuffle of bodies. At the front, a friar with soot-smudged cheeks hands you a cup. Barley broth, he says, with beef bones, 1 bone per 20 cups. You sip. The beef is more theoretical than actual, but the warmth cuts through the chill between your ribs. Better than plague tonic, someone behind you mutters. You glance back. A woman holds a brown bottle filled with something that looks like melted wax. She notices your gaze and shrugs. Old recipe. Vinegar angelica root powdered horn. Might work, might not. There's a pause, then she adds, tastes like despair. The sun begins to dip. A young man balances on a crate nearby, calling out from a thick sheaf of papers. Plague cookbooks, he cries. 12 recipes you can still make with no teeth. You chuckle. One woman actually buys a copy, flipping through with reverence. You catch a glimpse roasted dandelion roots, turnip mash with mace oatcakes fried in candle drippings. You stop at a booth where an apothecary has brewed a deep red syrup. For vitality, he claims. Rose hips, elderberry, cinnamon, and a prayer. You take a spoonful. It tastes like a Christmas you once dreamed. You find a low stone wall and sit watching London's long shadows stretch across cobbled alleys. The city has not stopped moving, not for plague, not for grief, not for hunger. Somewhere a baby wails. Somewhere else laughter echoes off brick. And across all of it, the smell of baking. You lift your nose, spelt bread, honey scones. You follow your instincts to a corner window just in time to see a girl pulling a tray from a fire-warmed oven. Honey oat biscuits, she tells you, only half burned. She offers one. You take it. It is sweet and strange and crumbly and perfect. And just like that, for one warm buttery moment, you feel okay. Evening falls with the grace of candle wax melting sideways, slow, golden, inevitable. You meander past shuttered stalls and worn-out vendors, their wares bundled in rags or tucked under arm as they vanish into alleyways like ghosts with groceries. The London air has cooled. Chimney smoke drifts low, and somewhere behind you a distant laugh crumbles into coughs. Dinner is calling, and in plague time, London dinner is whatever hasn't spoiled, vanished, or sprouted something unsettling in a bucket. You find yourself lingering near the back door of a tavern where a kitchen boy empties a pot of dishwater into the gutter. The aroma that escapes onion sweet, maybe beer, is surprisingly inviting. You peek around the corner and catch sight of a half-eaten trencher loaf on the step. A trencher, of course, is not really a plate and not really bread. It's both. A thick, dry slab of stale bread used as a base for food-absorbing juices until it becomes almost edible. Almost. You pluck it up and nibble. The gravy it's soaked in is long gone, but you get a ghost of mutton, something greenish, and a punch of black pepper. You chew slowly, not just for digestion, but because it might be your only course. At the corner of the next street, an older woman is selling boiled chestnuts from a dented copper pot. For your digestion, she promises handing them out wrapped in scraps of the London Gazette. The paper whispers plague counts as you peel the shell. You pretend not to hear them. A dog passes by with something wrapped in linen in its mouth. A man shouts after it, "That was my dinner, you little devil." The dog doesn't stop. You can't blame it. From a nearby alley, a strange scent wafts upward, something sweet, earthy, and fermented. You follow your nose to find a squat barrel covered with muslin cloth. 2 teenage boys are ladling liquid into clay cups and sipping with theatrical grimaces. Rhubarb wine, one explains. Only slightly poisonous. Not deadly, the other adds. Just adventurous. You taste it. It's sour and fizzy, like someone dared a fruit to ferment itself in a bucket. Your lips pucker. The boys cheer. You feel oddly victorious. Further down, a familiar voice calls out your friend from earlier, the pigeon pie woman now selling something different. Potato jelly, she exclaims. New recipe. Doesn't involve any actual potatoes. You raise an eyebrow. She winks. Well, maybe a few peelings. You take a spoonful. It's not jelly in the modern sense, more like a lukewarm paste flavored faintly with nutmeg. Somehow, it comforts you, like paste from a kinder world. Nearby, two men argue over the proper way to eat eel pudding. One swears by boiling, the other demands it be jellied. Historians still argue whether eel was beloved or merely abundant, but it was everywhere in 1665, London, braided into pies, smoked or slithered, live in buckets until sold. You pass a small boy hawking penny pies, round pastries filled with something. He won't say what. You buy one anyway. It smells like cloves and caution. As twilight thickens, light pours from a wide-windowed bakery. Inside, a woman pulls loaves from a wood-fired oven, her sleeves rolled and face smudged with soot. You step in, lured by the warmth. We tried a new mix tonight, she tells you. Oat barley and a touch of dried apple for sweetness. She hands you a slice. It's rough and dense but full of comfort. You eat it slowly, crumbs catching in your shirt. As you stand there, soaking in the firelight, a man seated by the hearth offers you a lump of something wrapped in cloth. Hard cheese, he says. Been aging in the cellar since the last frost. It smells like a foot in a dream, but it tastes surprisingly rich, sharp, nutty, layered with salt and stubbornness. You share a few bites and soon someone starts humming an old tavern tune. Others join in, their voices low and scratchy. One woman keeps time by thumping her cup on the table. Another offers you a sip of her ale, which is flat but honest. Outside, the streets have quieted. A constable passes, lantern swinging. He nods at you as if to say, "Still here, huh?" You nod back. You step into a narrow street now lined with candlelit windows. Somewhere behind one of them, a family is sharing boiled turnips with bread crusts softened in broth. In another, children fight over the last scrap of jam on a crust of rye. Dinner isn't about indulgence tonight. It's about survival wrapped in warmth, shared in silence, and seasoned with whatever you've got. From a third window, the scent of rice pudding drifts through, unusual, rare. Probably a luxury hoarded from before the outbreak. You imagine the creamy sweetness, the cinnamon dusted on top like snowfall. You walk on stomach pleasantly full, but not heavy, just content. A cat meows from a stoop. You sit beside it for a moment, offering the last bite of your oat loaf. The cat sniffs it, then looks offended. You shrug. It was worth a try. A few moments later, a church bell rings slowly, 8 times. The day is ending, but not before you take one last turn down an alley where a strange, savory aroma curls through the air. You find a woman roasting something skewered over a small brazier. Lamb's heart, she says, marinated in cider vinegar, sage, and hope. You take a bite. It's chewy, herbaceous, and surprisingly tender. Not the best thing you've ever eaten, but on this evening, in this corner of plague-ridden London, it might be the most real. You wander deeper into the lanes as night settles like a feather blanket across the rooftops. The clatter and clamor of day have given way to soft murmurings, doors bolting shutters, closing pots being stacked on kitchen shelves. The city exhales. Your shoes, still sticky from that rhubarb wine fiasco, squelch faintly as you pass a row of homes that smell faintly of soap and something stewed. You're full now, but the memory of meals past and the mystery of what tomorrow might bring curls around you like chimney smoke. Somewhere ahead, a candle glows in a windowsill, where a young woman is spooning something into bowls for 3 small children. You linger nearby, listening. You'll eat every lentil she chides gently, or the rat gets your pudding. The kids giggle and obey. You smile. By the 1660s, lentils had become a kind of fallback staple, affordable, filling, and durable in storage. Boiled to near mush and salted well, they passed for soup. Sometimes even soup with ambition. You imagine yourself there, bowl in hand, soaking bread crusts in the thin broth. A child offers you an invisible spoon through the glass. You mime eating. She beams. You round a corner and discover a narrow garden, likely once someone's attempt at a vegetable patch. The soil is poor, but you spot onions curling up stubbornly through the dirt, and maybe a few potato plants. Someone's tried to keep a fig tree alive, its leaves shivering in the breeze. Historians still argue whether Londoners truly embraced rooftop and backyard gardening during the plague, or if most efforts wilted from neglect. But here, in this tiny slice of soil, wedged between brick walls, someone's still trying. Next door you hear a scraping sound and peer through a slat in a garden gate. A middle-aged man is grinding dried herbs in a mortar, basil perhaps, or mint, maybe even wormwood. He adds a scoop to a pan over a low flame and stirs in what looks like mashed parsnip and barley. "Barley porridge," he mutters aloud with personality. He notices you. You hungry? You politely decline, but he insists on handing over a scrap of flatbread dotted with dried rosemary. You chew as you walk, the sharpness waking your tongue. Not far from there, you're drawn to a flicker of orange dancing across the cobblestones. A small fire crackles in a courtyard where 3 men huddle around a pot. Kanji 1 explains. Chinese rice porridge. We learned it from a sailor. The flavor is soothing, mild, warm, thick with garlic and bits of fish. You recognize it instantly as a dish with staying power. One bowl could carry someone through half a day or a whole bad week. Borrowed the recipe from the East India dock, another adds. We made it English by forgetting the spice. You chuckle. Your stroll takes you past a row of apothecaries, each darkened, now their windows full of promises. Restoratives, elixirs, and balm for the bowels. One still glows faintly. Inside, an old man cradles a jar of honey and murmurs to it like a prayer. Food and medicine, he says when he sees you, sweetens porridge, soothes sores, and makes mold taste like summer. He offers you a sliver of honeycomb on a tin spoon. It's sticky golden and comforting like sunlight trapped in wax. As you thank him, a teenager zips by with a cart full of empty barrels and wet linen. A single cabbage leaf falls from the heap, landing at your feet like a green, forgotten token. You leave it there, a gift for tomorrow's rats. A voice from above startles you. A woman leaning out her window holding a dish towel and a pie tin. "Come for pie," she calls. "Sorry, only air left." You grin and give a mock bow. There's music drifting in from a corner tavern, slow off-key fiddle, and the gentle stomp of weary feet. The door is open, so you wander in. The air is thick with beer sweat and roasted something. Tonight's special pottage surprise. You decline the mystery meal, but sit for a while soaking in the clatter of tankards and low conversation. One man argues that pottage is the perfect food. Just throw in whatever you've got and let it stew. Add a bone, he says, even if it's got no meat. Bones tell flavor secrets. Someone raises a toast to boiled carrots and stubborn teeth. Another adds, and to the turnip king of the plague. Laughter follows. Not uproarious, just real. You take another sip of weak ale and pretend to join the toast. Later on your way out, a sleepy baker offers you a muffin straight from a cooling tray. Test batch, he explains. Too much treacle, not enough sleep. You bite in. It's spongy sweet and sticks to your teeth in the best way. The sky has turned navy blue. A single star peeks out between the soot of the rooftops. You walk slower now, as if your feet are finally catching up to your full belly. A mother carries a sleeping child wrapped in a shawl. A cat darts beneath a cart. Somewhere, someone's burning something that smells like cloves and damp wool. You pass a church with an open door. Inside, a small group of people share a simple meal, bread, cheese, and apple slices passed hand to hand. Their voices are low, full of something softer than sorrow. Maybe hope. Tonight you've eaten more than you expected. Lentils, chestnuts, bread, rhubarb wine, eel debates, congee, honey treacle muffins, and turnip tributes. Food during the plague isn't about feasting. It's about memory, creativity, and the stubborn, humorous will to stay alive, one improvised bowl of pottage at a time. And as you lean against a wall near your resting place for the night, the distant scent of porridge drifts in like a lullaby, rich with barley thyme, and maybe if you sniff hard enough, a hint of roasted garlic. You close your eyes. The city hums. The city's pulse slows beneath a quilt of midnight shadows, and you find yourself settling near a quiet alley, the cobbles cool beneath your feet. The weight of the day's wandering settles like a gentle fog. The smells of baking bread, smoldering herbs, and distant hearth fires wrap around you like a soft, well-worn blanket. You breathe in deep, tasting the subtle mixture of smoke and earth and something sweet, maybe honey or dried fruit lingering on the breeze. Remember that flaky muffin from the baker, that sticky treacle clung to your tongue, stubborn as a city rumor. You smile at the memory because it feels like the smallest rebellion sweetness in times that were anything but. You think of the turnip, the king of the plague, the man said with a wink. Odd how such humble roots could earn royal titles when the streets were anything but regal. Food wasn't just survival. It was the quiet language of resilience. Historians still argue whether Londoners truly embraced inventive cooking during the plague, or if most simply made do with what little remained. But tonight, as you listen to the muted chatter of a few late wanderers, the line between hunger and hope feels thinner than ever. Your thoughts drift to the strange remedies you passed today, herbs ground into salves, honey's sticky sweetness, soothing more than just the throat, and the elusive recipes that traveled from distant lands like the comforting rice porridge from the East India dock. Imagine the sailors swapping tales and spices, sharing more than just cargo. Maybe those small exchanges were the first signs of a world slowly knitting itself back together. In this quiet moment, the city's noises fade. You hear only the soft rustle of leaves and the distant echo of a lute's lazy string. Your eyelids grow heavy, and you feel the pull of rest, gentle as a lullaby sung by the city itself. No grand feasts, no royal banquets here, just the slow, steady rhythm of daily life trying to catch its breath. The quiet meals, the shared bread, the patchwork gardens, and the simmering pots of pottage. They tell a story not often told of ordinary people finding comfort in simple flavors and shared moments and stubborn hope. Now, as you settle down, the city's hush becomes a soft invitation to rest, to dream, to remember that even in the darkest times, life carries on one spoonful at a time. Let your breath slow. Let the night carry you gently away from the alleys, the kitchens, the cobblestones. Sleep is near. Good night and sweet dreams.